し、いろんな気持ちと出会って、こんなにたくさんのごちそうを生み出すことができたんだ。
And yet, many of those gochizos still remain unused and are probably stuffed in the pod. I wonder what the party scone would have been like. We open with a recap from all the way back from the first episode. Yeah, as we're nearing the end of the series, we're actually getting a clip show, which I don't really mind. Like, again, we're near the end of the show, and we haven't got to a true clip show until now, so if anything, it's kind of warranted. Moreover, as we'll see, they're not just playing random clips with no real context, as right after that clip from the first episode, where we got to see the kid Shoma save Hajime, we actually checked in on the kid, and his voice that has changed significantly over the past year. Either puberty wrecked this kid, or he needs to lay off his 1 pack per day. I mean, to be fair, he was almost eaten by a space alien, so there's that. Speaking of which, he ended up having a little reunion with his savior. Seriously, the best part of this episode was Sachika's reaction to Shoma not even being fazed by that, with a face that just screams, "Really, dude? Do you want to end up on a list in this world too?" Anyway, after somehow getting away from his coach and friends after that little statement, Shoma and Hajime were able to catch up. The latter rather wholesomely apologized for his mother being a total Karen, and in turn, Shoma showed off how he was prospering, at least in terms of his addictions. Like this guy who refused to get off my hat. And of course, his food journal acted as a good means of recapping all of his initial form changes, which at this point had become rather redundant when his 3 upgraded forms are all just generally better. Though I will say, Chakodan probably got the worst of it, as most of those gochizos probably went to Hanto anyway. Later, Shoma took his young friend down the where he showed off his very pink motorcycle. Pretty sure it was some old dude wearing an afro. Meanwhile, we got probably my favorite setup for a bunch of clips when a newbie part-timer had arrived on Earth. He was unsure of what he was even supposed to do, which I would say you'd think this company would have their stuff together by this point in the series, but at the same time, they are currently under new management, which, yeah, I guess it makes sense that things are kinda messed up with this brand in charge. Fortunately, his company-issued smartphone included a training video told by a live-action version of Meron. Oh no wait, she's actually way cuter than that clingy little gremlin. But yeah, we actually got a little new lore, like actually learning the humble beginnings of Stomach Inc. as it is in the pushcart before they became a cartel. Yeah, just slightly better times. Also, this video is clearly out of date if they still are calling Longo the latest president. Worst of all, they're still claiming that they actually get health insurance. However, rather than getting some more interesting lore, the part-timer mostly just skipped that stuff and just went to learn more about the main riders with stuff that we already kind of know. Granted, it was at least narrated by Naivo, who had a few interesting things to say. It's totally not my design, like those spoons in his ears that look like earphones that make it look really cool, right? However, his part was also kind of outdated, considering he said that they had someone who could purge disobedient employees, which, yeah, about that. I'm not gonna lie, seeing Glota and Sita in the afterlife together was actually kind of comforting. I mean, obviously, they were both horrible people who got exactly what they effing deserved, but they were also victims of poor environments that even if Shoma hadn't been around, the drug cartel family was always doomed to collapse in on itself. Thus, them finding solace by being as far away as possible from such a toxic environment was actually kind of nice to see, and maybe they'll even find it with each other if they can eventually interact with one another in the afterlife. It was an effective way to recap their deaths and how it affected the other characters in this show, so really, nothing much else to say other than this was just a beautiful scene. In between all of this, we got some less interesting recaps, like Glockia explained to Hanto what the president of his world was like, but he couldn't explain too much because he was a blue-collar worker who didn't have much contact with the upper-tier bureaucrats. I mean, granted, even this little bit of lore would be interesting world building, but I'm pretty sure we already went over this stuff with Glockia, so I would say this was probably the most forced recap in this whole clip show, though at least it ended on a high note.
うまいやつ持ってこいよ。
こんなのわかんねえよ。
Well, if they're like steaks, you just have to find the more marbly ones. Yeah, I'll see myself out. Fortunately, and even amongst all of these old clips, we actually got a decent barrage of world building. First and foremost was that world of doors that the Stomachs had used to infiltrate Earth with. It was called the Door Space, and was discovered by Zom, who built their home around the whole thing. As a result, they didn't actually know much about it, other than that most of the doors led to Earth, as well as movie tie-ins. Yeah, they actually included a stinger this week that was blatantly just the first few minutes of the movie that's coming out this week. Basically, just to sum it up now, it was a parallel world story where all of our major characters lived in the same world, and Grand Newts didn't seem to exist, which in turn meant that Dark Treats didn't exist, and the Stomachs were fairly balanced adults. I mean, the twins were still kind of weird adult children, but I guess they're just some universal constants. However, things were about to be thrown off by this living embodiment of tooth decay, which, yeah, that's this guy's confirmed motif. And if you want to learn more, you gotta go see it in theaters, which maybe I'll be able to do. Surprisingly enough, for this clip show episode, they actually managed to work in a new fight, and a fairly decent one at that, when Hanto encountered Naival. He rescued what he thought was a helpless citizen rather than that part-timer from before, and the two fought in a very cramped alley, which made for a very unique exchange to say the least. It also highlighted how Naival really is more of a long-range fighter, due to of course being a nerd who doesn't like to get his hands dirty. However, by that same token, I guess he was also a bit of a weeb, as he seemed to take influence from a certain Fate character.
そこまでだ。
The final recap vignette for this episode ended up coming from Longo, who gave us probably the most interesting development when he revealed how he and his siblings reacted to their father coming home with Michiru and Shoma, and how he dealt with him. And this is why I don't like red wines. You can never see poison with those sort of pigments. I mean, granted, I think we all kind of got the feeling that Longo assassinated his own father, but still neat that we got confirmation in this sort of an episode in a way that makes sense, as Longo was of course recalling all of his choices that led up to his current state, and yet he still didn't take any responsibility for it, because of course he wouldn't. With that though, the episode ended with Naival going up that one path again, and encountering one of Shoma's Gochizos that threatened to take him to his master. For a clip show, this is actually a really good one. Sure, by its very nature, a lot of this episode was rather skippable, but the new stuff we did get was rather meaningful, and even felt like good callbacks to previous episodes. Just throw in a little world building, and maybe at least one good new fight, and you at least satisfy me. While I often don't see the need for clip shows at all, I can acknowledge how they can serve a significant purpose. That being to be a highlight reel to show how much a series has managed to accomplish over a certain number of episodes. In the case of this series, they are recapping like 80% of this show, as it will be ending next month. And for that, it really does feel like a celebration for what has been one of the best Rider series to come out of the Reiwa era, if not the best, depending on how they stick the landing. The episode itself managed to come up with some rather creative vignettes for their recaps that at the very least made sense in context, which is the least we can ask for. However, it also managed to kind of overachieve by including a bit of a random, yet still really good fight between Hanto and Naival, and little bits of world building, in particular confirmation that Longo had committed patricide. The movie tie-in stuff was kind of cheap in force, but at least it was kind of cut off from the rest of the episode, so you could just ignore it. And overall, as a clip show, this is definitely one of the better ones for its creativity, and surprisingly, a lot of new content for this sort of episode. It also seems to be acting as a calm before the storm, because as we said, the show is winding down, and Shoma might have to make some difficult choices. Thank you for watching, and if you want to look back at some of the good times, well, I think some of our old videos qualify for that. And along with that, we also do have new videos coming out almost every day, and some other long-form stuff in the works. Look forward to whatever comes next, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I'm just gonna do a little research on what makes for a tasty rock. Okay, let's see, what's this about stone soup?